All right, good evening. Hope everybody's having a good week. Jimmy here in Chicago. I want to do a live tonight. We're going to talk about going away or going to college, right? When wise guys, mob guys, when they get convicted, where do they go? We're going to talk about some of the federal and some of the state prisons that these guys go to. And these places are no joke. Most of them are medium, maximum security prisons, a lot of dangerous inmates, corrupt guards, nasty conditions, as you can imagine. You know, it's not like the movie Goodfellas, where these guys are, living it up and whining and dining in prison. Maybe back in the golden years, the outfit guys had some pull in prison, but nowadays, not only are they locked up, not only are their lives destroyed, but their families are affected. And the vast majority of mob guys that are in prison or that have served time, if it wasn't for the government's informants, rats, snitches, men that cooperated and wore a wire, if it wasn't for them, most of these men would not be in prison, in my opinion. But before we get into it, I want to thank everybody for following my channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. I enjoy all your comments. And I know it's a couple days later, but I want to dedicate this show to all the veterans out there, all the men and women that served our great country, and especially all our veterans that fought in combat and gave their lives so we could have our freedom. Quote of the day by my good friend Mary: college or jail, you're there to learn the 5 magic words. What's in it for me? As we all know, most people in jail will swear up and down that they're innocent. Because the system is so corrupt, there are actually a few people that are in jail that are innocent, and several men that really don't belong in jail. I don't believe in sending people to football prison terms. I would give them their freedom, but maybe hit them in the pocketbook. TC, what's going on, man? Yeah, we're going to talk about Marion right here in Illinois. But before we get into it, I'm going to talk about some of our veterans, right? I'm going to tell you a personal story. Let me remove this banner here really quick. It's a personal story. This is James Bell, my first cousin, Jimmy Bell. Years ago, he grew up on the southwest side near Midway Airport. And him and his friends used to hang out at this park called Marquette Park. And back in the day, it was mostly Irish, Polish, and Italian kids, all white neighborhood. And if any minorities, black or brown, went to that park, they'd have a lot of problems. There'd be a lot of fights because there was a lot of racism back then. Now it's just the opposite. Now if white people were to go to that park, they'd have a problem. But back in the late 60s during the Vietnam War, my cousin Jimmy Bell and his friends, they were at the park hanging out, and Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, and other black leaders were marching through the park, protesting the Vietnam War. Jimmy and his friends threw bottles, bricks, and rocks at Martin Luther King's entourage. Now, I was just a little kid, but I remember my dad told me that Jimmy and his friends got a lot of trouble. They got arrested. They got thrown into Cook County Jail. Shortly after that, like most young Americans, Jimmy Bell got drafted to go to Vietnam. And my dad told me that when he left for Vietnam, he didn't look like a Marine. He wasn't ready for Vietnam. Most of those young men never even left the neighborhood, let alone go to a different country. But when Jimmy Bell arrived at boot camp, his drill instructor was a big, tough, strong, intimidating black man. And a lot of his fellow Marines were black, Mexican, and Puerto Rican kids, tough kids from all over the country. So the racism Jimmy Bell had going into Vietnam boot camp went right out the window once he got there. Fast forward, Jimmy was part of the 3rd Marine Division, and he was in Quang Tri. It's way up north, the North Province of Saigon, a very, very dangerous area to be. And he wrote a letter to my father. I still have a letter today because he looked up to my dad. My dad was a Marine. My dad fought in Korea at the Chosin Reservoir. But Jimmy wrote a letter, Uncle Jim, it's hell here for the Marines, but keep praying for me and I'll make it. Shortly after he wrote that letter, it was his turn to go on point, and he was shot and killed February 19th, 1969, on his 19th birthday. That broke my dad's heart. I don't think my dad ever recovered from that. And my uncle Buddy, my dad's brother, Jimmy's father, was so distraught that his son was killed in Vietnam and very upset with everything going on in the country, with all the protesting going on in the Vietnam War. The man left the United States. He shelved the United States, moved way out to New Zealand, and never came back. But God bless my cousin, James Bell, a Marine and my hero. Now, there's a lot of outfit guys, mob guys, associates that were veterans as well. For example, Alan Dorfman. Alan Dorfman is a World War II veteran and a Marine. We all know, unfortunately, Alan Dorfman was killed by the Chicago outfit up north at the famous Purple Hyatt Hotel. His murder is still unsolved. Frankie Schweiss is the prime suspect. The Chicago outfit bosses, even though they knew Alan Dorfman served time in prison, they didn't think he would hold up a second time at his age, doing a second term in prison. They thought that he would possibly talk to the grand jury. And back then, the outfit bosses, guys like Arcardo, Iupa, Jack Cerrone, Sam Carlisi, they led with violence. They weren't taking any chances. If they thought that you might even consider talking to the government or the grand jury, you would get clipped. But I bring up Alan Dorfman because he was a World War II Marine. Speaking of World War II, another World War II Navy hero is Samuel Volpendesto. I forget the battle, but one of his ships was hit, and he dove under the water and was able to save most of the men in his platoon. He received a medal for that. You can see all the medals. But this is a World War II Navy vet, Chicago outfit associate. And I'll never forget seeing him at the Mike Sarno trial. That was one of my favorite trials. That's where it showed the Chicago outfits connection to the outlaw motorcycle gang. And one of the snitches in the crew actually wore a wire on Sammy. They called him the Master Blaster because he was an expert in explosives. So they got Sam on tape bragging about the bomb that he made, how he put 2 wicks in there. That was the bomb that the Sarno crew used to blow up a video poker competitor. They also got him on tape talking smack, talking shit about Large. He was complaining that he was doing all this work and he wasn't getting paid. He also said that the Northside crew, the Franzo's crew, wanted him. That was the money crew because they knew he wasn't a beefer. He was also on tape talking about Tony Arcardo, how Tony Arcardo made millions. He was also on tape talking about Mad Sam DeStefano, and he says he witnessed some poor bastard getting tortured by Mad Sam. But it was his own words on tape that convicted him. Now, if I'm a judge, I'm going to give this guy a break. Any Vietnam, Korean, World War II hero, in my opinion, regardless of their crime. I'm going to take that into consideration. Let's keep going with World War II veterans. You got Rocky and Felice. Rocky and Felice was number 3 in the Chicago outfit. I'll never forget him after he was convicted in the Good Ship Lollipop trial. They got him on racketeering, gambling, loan sharking, and 2 murders. Rocky and his crew allegedly murdered 2 bookies, Robert Plummer, and then the largest bookie in the country, Hal Smith. It was B.J. Jehoda, a rat, a snitch in his crew that didn't want to go to jail and decided to flip, cooperate, and wear a wire. His testimony convicted Rocky's entire crew. But during sentencing, I'll never forget it. He came out disheveled. Obviously, he wasn't in a good mood. And Rocky looks like an NFL football player. He's got massive forearms, massive hands, very intimidating. And he was complaining to the judge that he didn't get a fair trial and that he reminded female black federal judge Ann Williams that he's a World War II paratrooper that fought against one of Hitler's toughest regimes, but it fell on deaf ears. The judge convicted everybody in Rocky's crew and gave Rocky and Felice life in prison. He died shortly after that in the early 80s. But God bless Rocky Felice and his family. Another World War II guy, an Army guy, World War II veteran from the Genovese family. You got Matty the horse. You could see Matty shackled, surrounded by the agents. He worked under the chin. But again, World War II, fought for this country. You think the government would give him a little slack. Now here's a guy, James Turk Torillo, whose life was cut way too short. He was in the Marine Corps with my father. They fought at the Chosin Reservoir. Luckily, they both made it back. They lost a lot of friends there. And my dad said that Turk Torillo was by far the toughest Marine. Now, my dad was around tough kids all over the country. Detroit, Cleveland, New York City, Boston, Philly. And some of them would challenge Turk Torillo to a fight, but they would eventually back down. Fast forward, my dad and Turk Torillo come home from Korea. And my dad found out, he actually ran into Turk at a bar in Melrose Park, but he found out through the Chicago Sun-Times that James Turk Torillo was an upcoming mob boss. My dad, my mom could not believe it that my dad's good buddy in the Marine Corps was an upcoming mob boss. But he would have been boss before Sam Carlisi and Joe Ferriola. And like Joe Nagel, he had some health issues and his life was cut too short. But it was this man right here that piqued my interest in the Chicago outfit. Once I found out my dad was in the Marine Corps with a mob guy, I started buying some of the mob books, William Romer books. I went to my very first trial, the Gus Alex trial, and then I was hooked. Let's read some comments. Hope everybody's having a good week, man. Let's see here. What's going on, Paul? LinkedIn, yeah. That would be funny to see Wiseguys on LinkedIn. Thanks, Paulie. Yeah, Rocky and Felice was a World War II paratrooper. A bad mother effer. Let's see here. Albert Anastasia, I didn't know that. Paratrooper, World War II. Yeah, there's probably several other World War II, Korea, Vietnam veterans that I'm forgetting to mention. Yeah, Jackie Presser, he was a snitch. A lot of people didn't know that. He was kind of riding the coattails of his father, major union guy in Cleveland. But get this, Jack Cerrone and Joey Aiuppa warned Tony Ducks, in fact, Tony, numerous times not to trust Jackie Presser. But Tony Salerno and Ducks really didn't take the advice. They trusted Jackie Presser. They thought he was solid because of his father. But it turned out Joey Aiuppa, Jack Cerrone, Tony Arcardo were right when they tried to warn the boss of the Genovese family and the Lucchese family. That's a good point there, TC. Yeah, Dorfman made a ton of money, as we know. All right, let's get back into it. Now, here's I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. You got Dominic Montaligo, Vietnam combat veteran, war hero. As we all know, Vietnam was one of the most violent, deadliest wars in U.S. history, went on for like 13, 14 plus years. This gentleman was also a made member or a close associate of the Gambino family, and he worked directly with the Roy DeMeo crew and the Gemini twins. That was a very dangerous, lethal crew. And Dominic is also an artist. So he, in his podcast, he talks about his experiences in Vietnam. He talks about his life of crime with his uncle Nino Gaggi and Roy DeMeo. But this is a combat veteran, Vietnam war hero. So God bless, again, all our men and women that served. God bless all the men that fought and gave their lives. Now we're going to get into it. Let's read another comment here. I can't believe they doubted his services. Yeah. So ignorant, man. Wow. Unbelievable. Yeah, I remember seeing that. I mean, that's pretty bad because, again, Vietnam was a very, very violent, deadly war, fought in the jungle. And for him to say that, I mean, I can't even imagine what went on with Dracula and at that Gemini Lounge. If I'm ever in New York City again, I want to go past that place. I think it's still there. But let's get into it. Let me show you. We are going to start out. We're going to talk about. Sorry, guys. Milan, Michigan, right? This is a haven for mob guys. Mob guys from all over the country, Boston, Philly, New York City, Chicago, all have spent time here. But I bring up Milan today, Milan, Michigan, because this is where Junior Calabrese and his father, Frank Sr., were housed together. Now, I wonder, is that a coincidence that these two ended up at the same prison? Junior was actually shocked to learn he was at the same prison with his father. And this prison is where Junior planned and plotted to steal all his father's money and lock him up for life, and that's exactly what Junior did. He testified in his own words on the stand at the family secrets trial. He was one of the first witnesses called. He was white as a ghost, so nervous. You can imagine he's testifying against his father. It's the first time he's seen his father in a couple of years. But he testified that he wore gloves, went to the law library, and typed a letter to the FBI. That letter is what started the family secret investigation. Without Junior's letter, there would have never been a family secrets trial. Junior will tell you he only wanted to lock up his father. He didn't want to hurt anybody else in the outfit, but that's total bullshit. He knew damn well by growing up in that life that his letter and testimony and cooperation would destroy many people in the Chicago outfit, associates, family, and friends. He destroyed many, many lives. His own brother, Kurt, despises what he did. And Kurt took more abuse, more of the physical, verbal abuse than Junior did. But this is where Junior wore a wire. He got his father talking about murders Frank Sr. should have never have talked about. He used his Uncle Nick against his father, and he basically conned his father. But he did this in Milan, Michigan, and Junior is so lucky Frank Sr. never found that wire. But imagine Junior at the family secrets trial, sitting on the witness stand, 10 feet away from Frank Calabrese's father. And Frank Calabrese is pretty intimidating. Big guy, massive, a little bit older aged. Half the time Frank would be shaking his head, laughing out loud. But at times when he would lose his temper, he would pound his fist on the table and start yelling out loud. I can't imagine, though, testifying against your own father. He reminds me of the Menendez brothers. Once they were cut out of the will, they planned to kill mom and dad. It's exactly what they did. They even reloaded. Now, some of the liberals out in California are really making a push to free those guys. If they free the Menendez brothers, they better free every other mob guy that's locked up, in my opinion. But that's Junior, his father, Frank Calabrese. We all know the story. They were locked up together in Milan, Michigan, and that's where Junior wore a wire on his own father. We'll keep going now. We're going to go back. USP Lewisburg. Several gangsters from across the country, going back to the old days till present, have all spent time here. Peter DeFranzo did 10 years in Leavenworth, never ratted, never cooperated. His brother, as we all know, John DeFranzo, was boss of Chicago outfit at one point. Pete was pretty much the underboss's right-hand man and a very powerful member of the Elmwood Park crew. Peter DeFranzo also made a fortune in the construction business. Now, for you fools that think John DeFranzo and Pete DeFranzo were informants, I totally disagree. John DeFranzo served time in prison, and this guy here, as I just mentioned, did 10 years in jail. Pete DeFranzo, God bless the DeFranzos and their families. 10 years in Lewisburg. Now, here's a gentleman that I actually met from my neighborhood, Mikey Switek. Mikey was a master thief and an expert in explosives. And years ago, he got caught along with Danny and another guy. They sold guns and explosives to undercover ATF FBI agents. Total entrapment. But he was convicted. Mikey Switek did 22 years in Lewisburg. He could easily cooperate and flipped. But this was a great man. I was very fortunate to bum a couple smokes from him, have lunch with him, drink coffee, and just bullshit and bust balls. I'll never forget some of the stories that him and I shared. But God bless this man, Mikey Switek, a stand-up guy, a legend in the Chicago outfit, and an inmate at Lewisburg. Did football numbers at this place. Let's read some more comments. I would love to interview Kurt Calabrese, but he probably wouldn't come on my show. I don't even know if he watches my show. I seen Kurt almost every day at the Family Secret Trial, but I never once said anything to him because I don't know him. And then last summer, I did see him at the Taylor Street Fest. He was hanging outside, same bar I was at. I was 5 feet away from him, but I felt uncomfortable just going up to him, man. The last thing I want to do is make him uncomfortable. He did a couple interviews, one with Michael Francis, one with these two other guys, and it was actually really good interviews. I don't know if you guys seen it, but definitely check out Kurt Calabrese, and he gives a total different perspective than his brother Junior. But I would love to get Kurt Calabrese on the show. I just don't think he would. But God bless him. That poor man has been through hell and back, and I'm glad he's totally turned his life around. And Paulie, you're absolutely right, man. Yeah, they do look a lot. Yeah, again, in my opinion, Junior had a plan, and that plan was to steal all his dad's money and keep him locked up for the rest of his life. Because keep in mind, Frank Calabrese had a date. He was coming home. I don't know how the Junior lives with himself. Now Junior's doing tours, interviews, book deals, and looking for a movie. No, but I would love to have. Well, I might have heard Al Capone's voice. But yeah, I would like to check that out. That sounds pretty interesting. I did go past Al Capone's home, though, in Miami, outside of Star Island. All right, make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. Amanda, how are you? Bensonhurst, man. Can you imagine growing up in Bensonhurst in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Wiseguys, mob guys, social clubs everywhere. I went there maybe 2 years ago, and it's definitely changed. The only thing left was that little pizzeria from Saturday Night Fever. But it's mostly all Asians now, very few Italians left. But man, that was kind of like a Taylor Street, a Grand Avenue, and Bridgeport all in one. I really like that Arthur Avenue Italian neighborhood in the Bronx. That's my favorite. Paulie, or anybody, if you guys want any of the transcripts from the Nick Calabrese testimony, let me know. I also have Lenny Patrick's testimony when he testified against Gus Alex. There's no charge at all. I'll give those guys to you. If you guys ever want to do a tour of the Grand Avenue neighborhood, Taylor Street, Bridgeport, let me know. It's pretty cool. But let's keep going here. Where'd we leave off? Okay, kind of like Milan, Michigan, you got Terre Haute, Indiana. Hang on, let me remove this banner here. Yeah, I'll shoot an email. So I'll put a link with my email so you can shoot me an email if you don't have it already. Actually, I'll do that now. If you guys want to send me an email or reach out to me, that's my email. Also, I have shirts, selling shirts for about $40, $45. Custom shirts, Joe Lombardo, Sam Carlisi, The Wild Bunch, Al Capone, Alderman Fred Rohde. I got 8x10 photos. Let me know. Okay, so now Terre Haute, Indiana. What a lot of wise guys like about Terre Haute and Milan, Michigan, it's close to Chicago, right? They don't like being put on flight therapy where they fly them all over the country far from their families. They want to be close to Illinois, as close as possible, so their family members can visit them. So Terre Haute is, again, a pretty popular federal prison. I think it's a medium security prison where a lot of wise guys go, not just Chicago outfit guys, but guys from all over the country. But I bring up Terre Haute because that's where Jimmy Marcello got sentenced after he was pinched in the Sam Carlisi trial. Sam Carlisi trial was the second trial I went to. His entire crew, Sam Carlisi, Jimmy Marcello, Tony Zizzo, the Hatch, and a couple other guys all got convicted for racketeering, gambling, and loan sharking. Jimmy Marcello stood up, does his time in Terre Haute, Indiana prison, finally comes home, and a few months later, there's a knock on the door. He gets pinched at the Family Secrets trial. I've always felt sorry for Jimmy Marcello, and I still feel sorry for him today. But he was at Terre Haute, Indiana with Nick Calabrese. Nick Calabrese testified that when they were together, doing time together, Nicky was complaining that Frank Calabrese wasn't paying him and that nobody was taking care of Nick Calabrese's wife when Nick was away. Nobody from the 26th Street crew, his brother, nobody. So Jimmy Marcello told him as soon as we got out of here, because they both had a release date, that Nick, he would talk to Angelo Petrie and Nick would be released from the 26th Street crew and Nick Calabrese could work for Jimmy Marcello. So Jimmy Marcello offered him a job. He also had his brother, Mikey Marcello, another defendant in the Family Secrets trial, immediately start dropping off $5,000 a month for Nick Calabrese's wife. So like Rocky and Felice, Jimmy Marcello took care of Nick Calabrese's family while he was locked up when nobody else did. And what does Nick Calabrese do to pay him back? He rats him out. He puts him at the scene where the Splatcher brothers were killed. He also testified that Jimmy Marcello took part in killing of the two guys from the Strangers in the Night murder. Now, at first, when they went to Nick, they had his DNA on the John Feckerata bloody glove that Nick dropped when he killed Feckerata. And they confronted him. They said, hey, bro, we've got your DNA on the bloody glove at the Feckerata scene. Nick had nothing to say to him. Then they threatened Nick Calabrese with the electric chair, and he changed his mind. regarding Jimmy Marcello. At first, he said he couldn't remember who dropped him off at the house in Bensonville. Then 3 months later, he said it was John Feccarata and Jimmy LaPetria. He left Jimmy out of it. Then he changed his story a third time and said, no, it was little Jimmy Marcello. He picked up me, Feccarata, and brother Jimmy LaPetria in a real fancy van at a Venture parking lot. So that's 2-3 different stories Nick told. To me, right away, that's reasonable doubt. He flip-flop on the story. And as far as the strangers in the night murder, the jury, I forget, they either hung or they acquitted Jimmy of participating in that murder. So they didn't believe Nick Calabrese entirely. However, Judge Zagel, very powerful federal judge, he overruled the jury's verdict on the strangers in the night murder. The judge agreed with the prosecutor. He believed Nick Calabrese, and he ended up convicting Jimmy Marcello on that murder as well. Just doesn't seem fair. But hopefully they'll release Jimmy Marcello one day from prison. He spent enough time in jail. It's time this man comes home to his family. His outfit days are long behind him. And I heard, I hope it's not true, that Jimmy Marcello is in Colorado at ADX Supermax. Now, there's no reason James Marcello needs to be at the most maximum prison in the country. Sammy the Bull spent time here. The shoe bomber, Richard Reed. Ramzi Yousef, the terrorist that tried to blow up the World Trade Center in 1993. Ted Kaczynski. El Chapo's here. Also, who spent time at the ADX Supermax, believe it or not, was Joe Lombardo. I can't believe they would have a 80-something-year-old man locked up at a maximum prison like ADX Supermax. He's no longer a threat to anybody. But I think, I don't know if it's true, I heard that Joe Lombardo threatened Judge Zagel. And that's one thing, you cannot threaten a federal prosecutor or a judge. But it's one thing for these guys to be punished and sent to prison. But I think it's evil that they punish them even more. But God bless Joe Lombardo. He eventually passed away at Butner in North Carolina. Frankie Calabrese, as we all know, was convicted in the family secrets trial. He died on his favorite holiday, Christmas. He died at Butner, North Carolina as well. Nicky Scarfo, he spent time at Butner, North Carolina, boss of the Philly family. That's interesting. Some of the Chicago outfit guys and some of the East Coast guys were locked up together and actually became friends and acquaintances. Here's a maximum federal prison. A lot of outfit guys, associates, Boston, New York, Philly guys ended up at Water. Butner, FCI Butner. As I mentioned, this is where Frank Calabrese died. This is where Joey Lombardo passed away. Several other Chicago outfit guys and other mob guys, as I mentioned, Nicky Scarfo. Let's read some comments here. Yeah, absolutely. Nobody did more damage to the Chicago outfit than Nick Calabrese. He was the only made member to ever testify in court. And again, he participated in 14 murders. He gave the government information on about a dozen other unsolved murders and gave the who's who on who all the major players, made guys, and associates are. Some of the guys, the organized crime had no idea. Guys like the Pizza Man, Al Tornabini, or Fred Barber, Mayor Daley's friend. But yeah, Nick Calabrese, Junior Calabrese, their testimony, their cooperation crippled what was left of the Chicago outfit. Yeah, some guys, it's coming up shortly, they got paid. Their families got paid for their silence. Yeah, I think it was like 2,000 to 5,000. I forget the dollar amount. But back then, that was quite a bit of money. And Jimmy Marcello thought that he was buying insurance by taking care of Nick's wife. Michael Marcello wasn't so sure, and he said, I hope that works out for you, buddy. But obviously, Michael Marcello was correct. And Nick Calabrese, the coward that he is, even though Jimmy Marcello took care of him and his family, he flipped, knowing his testimony was going to send him to prison for the rest of his life. Hang on, I want to make sure I'm not missing any comments. Yeah, absolutely, Pete. I just said that. Yep. Mikey Marcello was dropping off payments to Nick Calabrese's wife while he was locked up. There's a video on YouTube of Michael visiting Jimmy Marcello in prison, and they're talking in code. It's kind of neat because Jimmy Marcello's eating Fritos and M&Ms. Michael Marcello was not in court. I think he pled out, so he didn't have to go to trial. But I did see him testify at the John Ambrose trial. That was the babysitter trial. That was the federal marshal that Jimmy Marcello and Michael Marcello were trying to bribe so they could get to Nick Calabrese. Nick Calabrese came very close to getting clipped by Jimmy and Michael Marcello. Guys like Sarno, Pete DeFranzo, and others were a big threat to Nick Calabrese. If they would have got to John Ambrose with that bribe, they could easily kill Nick Calabrese. Also, I think Frank Calabrese, or one of them, had to smuggle a gun into the prison, and they were going to kill him in prison. But one of the inmate snitches ratted him out, told one of the guards. But Nick Calabrese came very close to getting killed. These are facts. Let's see here. What's going on, Joey? Good to see you, man. Hey, nice. You guys know each other. Cool. Where are you guys from? Where's everybody from? Yeah, absolutely, Paulie. If they can free the Menendez brothers, there's a lot of outfit guys that done a lot less crime that should be free as well. But again, here's my email. If you guys want to reach out to me, send me an email. Yeah, that's another thing. Junior forgot to tell you the time he was facing in prison. Also about he underestimates his drug use and drug dealing. Believe me, he had other motives. He did that deliberately, again, to steal his money and keep his father locked up. He's so lucky Frank Calabrese didn't kill him when he got caught stealing Frank's money years ago. So there's Frank Calabrese. He could easily kill him or had him set up, but he gave him a pass. You think Junior would have did the same thing? Okay, let's get back to Kirby. How's it going, man? Up in Antioch, eh? Love it. Yeah, that's a classic photo. Thanks, Mario. Appreciate it, man. Let me know if you want some transcripts. You guys want a shirt, whatever you want. Let me know. Yeah, out of all the crime families, Boston, New York, Philly, Chicago, and Detroit had the least amount of informants. I think Detroit had the least amount of informants because, one, they were a lot smaller, and two, they kept it in the family. But Boston, New York, Philly, all those guys ratted each other out and ended up killing each other. I'm actually going to do a show about the Chop Shop Wars, too. I think that'll be a good topic. Yeah, let's get back to this. I got some more for you guys. Here's another federal prison. A lot of mob guys and associates went to. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think Bobby Cavone, he was a member of the Rocking Felice crew. I think he spent time here. I may have got it confused, along with other Chicago outfit guys. I know my man Paulie C has spent time in McKean. Paulie C got pinched. Basically, his good friend, one of his old friends who's now passed away, George Brown, wore a wire on him. Paulie tried to help the guy, and the guy was basically, they were on tape talking about giving the guy a beating because the guy owed money. He ended up doing 3 years. Paulie C did 3 years in the MCC. He told me it was one of the nastiest jails he's ever been in. As we all know, this is a notorious federal prison downtown, right across just 2 blocks from the Dirksen Federal Building, not far from the Chicago Board of Trade, close to the Royal Point Shop. And this is similar to the notorious federal prison in Brooklyn, where a lot of John Gotti, Sammy Gravano, Frankie Locke, a lot of the New York Wiseguys end up, where Jeffrey Epstein hung himself, where P. Diddy is, Giselle Maxline. It's very similar to that. One of the most corrupt, violent, dangerous federal holding prisons in the country. This is where outfit guys and white-collar criminals, major federal cases, this is where they are housed while they're waiting trial. And some of these guys sit here for 2 to 4 years, but pretty much almost every Chicago outfit guy that's done time in prison, associates, have all spent time here. But the food is nasty. The warden, the guards are corrupt. There's been murders here. I think there's been 2 prison escapes. There's been rapes, drug dealing. They literally need to fucking level this building. But this is the notorious MCC prison. As I mentioned, Paulie Caparelli, he survived. I asked him, Paulie, how did you survive? He looked at me very serious. He said, Jimmy, it's part of the life. And I knew exactly what he meant, meaning if you want to live the life of a gangster, of a wise guy, going to jail is part of it. And as we all know, real gangsters, you either end up dead or you end up in jail. Now here we got Coco, Bobby Cavone. He spent a couple years in the MCC, I think 3 to 5 years. And then he either went to Atwater or McKean, I forget. But this man here on the left, he ended up doing like 15 years. He could have easily have flipped against Rocky and Felice, Sally, Lou Marino in the Good Ship Lollipop trial, but he did not. Rocky and Felice paid his wife, Coco's wife, a couple thousand a month so he would remain silent. Rather than talk to the grand jury, he shut his mouth. Rocky and Felice, like Joe Ferriola, they took care of their people. That's why they had some of the most loyal guys in their crew. But God bless Bobby Cavone. I'm trying to get him on here to give an interview. He told me how nasty the conditions were at the MCC. He said the ventilation, the air is so bad in there you can barely breathe. But God bless this man, a stand-up guy to the end. And then right next to him, you got Little Dirk. We all know Little Dirk's in a lot of trouble. He just got sent from Dade County Jail all the way out to California. I hope he's safe out there. But allegedly, he hired 5 guys to fly out to California and put a hit on this one guy. They actually killed the wrong guy. They killed the guy's cousin in revenge to King Von, the King Von murder in Atlanta. But here's 2 good friends. Little Dirk, hopefully somehow, some way he could, I don't know how he's going to get out of that trial. Maybe he'll have a good lawyer. But here's Coco Cavone, Bobby Cavone, spent a ton of time in prison, 15 years without ever ratting. Now here's another guy, John Kappas, right? One of the biggest drug dealers on the southwest side of Chicago. And if you were doing blow in the 80s, there's a good chance you bought your coke directly or indirectly from John Kappas. Good friend of mine, good friends with his family, comes from a good Greek family. His brother graduated from Purdue. I think his sister is a lawyer. But unfortunately, John fell for that fast life. Him and his crew were making around $10,000 a week. They were wearing very expensive watches, driving expensive cars, and basically bragging and playing the role. Everybody at the bars, clubs, and parties all knew what Kappas and his friends were up to. I never really got involved in cocaine, thank God, because I saw it destroy people's life. A lot of my friends went to jail. Some of my friends died. A couple people OD'd and in and out of rehab. So all it does is just destroy people's lives. But when Kappas got pinched, well, one of his buddies got pinched, who's a good friend of mine. He had a little blow on him. Cop pulled him over And rather than suck it up and do a couple of years in jail, he flipped and cooperated and testified against Kappas and all his crew. These guys were all good friends from various high schools in the southwest suburbs. Kappas's girlfriend, Julie Craig, and his good friend testified against him. However, Kappas, young Kappas, 21 years old, he was a little cocky, a little arrogant, and he threatened the prosecutor, Mitch Mars. We all know Mitch Mars is public enemy number one in Chicago outfit. Mitch Mars prosecuted all the mob guys. And here's John Kappas, a young 20-year-old punk, threatening the prosecutor. Like Joe Lombardo, Frank Calabrese, when he mouthed, "You are a effing dead man" to prosecutor Marcus Funk. Judges and federal prosecutors, they don't like it when you threaten them. So the Greek judge, John Kappas is Greek. The judge was Greek. Kappas thought maybe he'd give him some slack because he's Greek. The judge slammed him because he showed no remorse and he was cocky and threatened the prosecutor. The judge gave Kappas, at 21 years old, 40 years in prison. At the sentencing, Kappas broke down, started crying, and said, I admit I sold drugs, but I never killed anybody. Fast forward, Kappas stood tall. He did his time, never ratted, never rolled. He could have easily gave up his cocaine connection or gave up some of his outfit connections. But this guy did his time like a man. Luckily for John, it got reduced to 20 years. He did 20 years in prison. Now he's home. He went into the car business. Then he opened up a restaurant. Now he's dedicated his life to help other people. But this is a stand-up guy who totally turned his life around 360. Let's read a couple more comments here. Yeah, what'd you think of that mob museum? At first, I really didn't want to go to the mob museum. I thought it was pretty cheesy, but actually it was pretty cool, pretty interesting. I actually found myself talking to a couple ATF FBI agents. They had the old windbreaker jackets with the yellow FBI on it, and they were telling stories to a small group how they would put handcuffs on Tony Spilotro and Frankie Collada and other guys. And this was shortly after the Family Secrets trial, so I had a lot of fresh in my mind. And I was telling them stories from the Family Secrets trial, how Joe Lombardo testified, Frank Calabrese, and for about 10, 15 minutes, the conversation switched where these guys were actually listening to some of my stories. But yeah, if you're ever in the mob Vegas, I definitely recommend checking out the mob museum. It's pretty cool. Half the basement is all about the Grand Avenue crew. Joel, what's going on, man? Good to see you. A lot of Irish, a lot of Italian gangsters in Massachusetts, right? Yeah, absolutely. You remember. That's the first place I ever got served underage. We used to go there 18, 19 years old. We wouldn't even get carded and get drunk on Rush Street. Yeah, Pete, I'll do a little story on the Chop Shop Wars. Unlike Philly and New York and Boston where they were killing each other, Chicago outfit, unless you got out of line, they really weren't killing you. But if you got out of line or broke rules, obviously they would whack you. But the only war we really had was the Chop Shop Wars. And I'm going to do a story on that. Yeah, this breaks my heart. There's no reason Jimmy Marcello needs to be at ADX Supermax, right? 80 years old. He didn't threaten the judge. He didn't threaten the lawyer, the prosecutor. But he's labeled as boss of the Chicago outfit. Anything with organized crime, there's no reason at all he deserves to be at the ADX Supermax. Keep in mind, it's miles and miles away from his home here in Chicago. This man needs to be released, and I hope his lawyers are trying to fight him to get him out, man. Yeah, the Irish. Yeah, I love all the stories too. Best stories are from the neighborhood guys that knew these mob guys. But the Irish gang, they were, you had the Irish gang, the Jewish gang, and the Italian gang. Now you got the Russian gang and the street gangs. San Jose, wow, nice. Well, hey, if I'm ever around the San Jose area, we can maybe hang out one day, probably have a drink. You could show me around. I'm sure there's several outfit guys that live out there in Palm Springs, San Diego, San Jose. Antioch, okay, nice and close. All right, guys, I got some more for you. I'm not done yet. Yeah, of the worst, one of the top three, probably because they probably have the largest population. But LA County Jail, Cook County Jail, and Rikers, those are the top three worst county jails. Just ask any inmate that spent time there. Alabama, I can't even imagine what Alabama's like, especially if you're a white guy. 40 years, that's right. Interesting about the Kappas kid case is, I did a story if you want to check it out, but two of Kappas's customers got hooked on coke pretty bad, and he was fronting them, typical addict, and they ended up owing him quite a bit of money. And Kappas and his friends were putting a lot of pressure on these kids. Make a long story short, both kids committed suicide. And one of the kids' father, I forget his name, was kind of a big time, like a politician, a guy with political connections. So they put a lot of pressure on that Kappas trial because the judge really wouldn't allow it in the evidence, but they hinted that the reason those kids committed suicide is that Kappas and his crew got him hooked on drugs. Now, I don't know if I'm buying that, to each his own, but Kappas and his friends were pressuring these kids to pay up, and they ended up killing themselves. So the prosecution was trying to throw that on Kappas as well. Yeah. Sonny Francis left jail. He was 100 years old. There's no reason to lock up somebody 75 years and older. Yeah, that's right, Paulie. But then again, it got reduced. And again, he threatened the prosecutor. So here, let's get back. Let me show you. I got more for you guys before I'm done. Now, also at the notorious MCC, you had Wild Bunch member Jerry Scarpelli. He committed suicide there, kind of like a Jeffrey Epstein. When they found him, had a plastic bag around his head, and his hands were taped behind his back. So at first, they suspected it was suicide. But then later on, when they found out Frankie Schweiss was on the same floor as Scarpelli, some people think Frankie Schweiss killed Scarpelli right there in the MCC to shut him up. One of over 1,000 unsolved murders in the Chicago outfit. I believe that, though. I believe Frank Schweiss killed Scarpelli to make sure he didn't talk. This guy was one of the most lethal hitmen in the Chicago outfit. He was kind of like a free agent, kind of like a Butchie and Harry Elliman. He would travel across the country and do hits, murder contracts, not only for the outfit, for some of the New York guys as well. He was one of the defendants at the Family Secrets trial, prime suspect in Alan Dorfman, prime suspect in Marilyn Monroe, prime suspect in killing his girlfriend, this Greek girl, who he thought was going to expose him about the Marilyn Monroe murder. He actually killed her and then dumped her in the Chicago River. That's what a real piece of shit this guy was. But imagine him, if he wasn't sick, in the courtroom at the Family Secrets trial, sitting at the same table as Frank Calabrese. I can't even imagine these two together. By the way, during the court, none of these defendants ever look at each other. They act like they don't know each other. But outside the jury's presence, you could see them hand signaling and mouthing to each other, trying to communicate. But the federal marshals put a block to it. He came out, though, after the Family Secrets trial for sentencing, and he started ripping and yelling racial slurs to Bijet, the Arabic prosecutor. But this man allegedly killed probably over 50 people. But he was in the MCC as well. Speaking of the MCC, here's a photo of Rocky and Felice, Sally D, and some of Rocky's crew leaving the Dirksen Federal Building, getting on the bus, driving 2 blocks away to the MCC. Pretty much every Chicago outfit guy and associate that ever got locked up on federal charges spent time in the MCC. Sam Carlisi did a stint there during his trial. Jimmy Marcello, Tony Zizzo, Anthony the Hatch, Sally D, Louis Marino, Gabit, Bobby Kozo. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Unfortunately, though, Rocky was convicted. He died in his early 80s. Now, here we go. One of the oldest, most violent, most corrupt county jails in the country is the Cook County Jail, 26 in California, right up there with Rikers Island, which they call Gladiator School, and LA County Jail. Al Capone has spent time here. Harry Allman was locked up here. I went to Harry Allman's second trial at the 26th in California for the murder of a union official named Bill Logan. The first trial years ago, the judge found him not guilty. But they threw out the double jeopardy law and they charged him years later because the corrupt, lowlife scumbag, piece of shit lawyer Bob Cooley flipped, wore a wire, and testified against Harry Allman. He was the one that bribed the judge shortly after the trial. When the judge was retired in Arizona, Judge Frank Wilson committed suicide. I blame Bob Cooley on that. Also, Bob Cooley not only destroyed Harry Allman and sent him to prison for the rest of his life, but destroyed Harry's family. All because he had a major gambling habit, alcohol habit, and a drug habit. Rather than do some time in prison, he didn't have to pay some of his gambling debts to guys like Marco D'Amico, John DeFranzo. Bob Cooley decided to cooperate. He wore a wire, and his cooperation sent Harry Allman to prison the rest of his life. But Harry Allman spent time in the Cook County Jail. Also, one of my friends, Bobby P. from the PK crew, he spent some time in the Cook County Jail. There's many, many other people. I just can't mention them all. But I was worried about Bobby Pinozzo when he was at the Cook County Jail because one of his charges, him and the crew were robbing drug dealers' stash houses. So he had some of his ops were locked up in the county at the same time as him, and he's definitely going to be a target. But Bobby P. survived the Cook County Jail. Now he's doing his time, and he's got a date. Hopefully he'll come home soon. Now we're going to talk about Marion, Illinois, right? John Gotti, boss of the Gambino family, was sentenced to Marion, Illinois. And during one of the visits, he was complaining about the food and the conditions and the guard. And he told his brother, Pete, you can hit me in the head with a pipe if I could have a bite of a mozzarella prosciutto sandwich. That's how bad the food was in Marion, that Gotti told his brother, you can crack me in the head with a pipe just for a nice Italian sub. Many other Chicago outfit guys spent time at Marion as well. Right here, Southern Illinois. And I heard from a few people, the Gottis, when they would visit John Gotti, they would fly into Chicago, spend time with people they knew in Chicago, and then drive down to Marion to see John Gotti. Here's Leavenworth, right? One of the oldest federal prisons in the country. Place looks like a dungeon. Paul Ricca, one of the most powerful men in Chicago outfit, served his time here. And a great story I told before, Tony Arcardo, who was his underboss at the time, would pose as a lawyer and visit Paul Ricca, and they would talk in code about outfit business. But this man here was one of the richest, most powerful, most dangerous, most quietest mob bosses in the history of Cosa Nostra. Kind of like a Angelo Bruno out of Philly, Carlo Gambino, or Tony Arcardo. Joey Aiuppa, boss of Chicago outfit, who led with violence, who led with fear. He spent 10 years in Leavenworth. Him, Joe Lombardo, Angelo LaPetria, Jack Cerrone, a couple guys from Milwaukee, Kansas City, all got indicted during the Strawman case. That's where they were skimming millions of dollars from 4 mobbed-up hotel casinos. But right before he went to prison, Aiuppa met with Carlisi and Joe Ferriola and said, I want them both knocked down, referring to the Spilotro brothers. He was so upset, he was foaming at the mouth. 1 and 2, I don't care how you do it, just do it. Now think about that. We all know why the outfit killed Tony Spilotro. Some say they killed Michael because they needed Michael. They used Michael to get Tony to a meeting. But I believe they killed Michael Spilatro because he was selling cocaine out of one of his restaurants, but I'm not sure. But I think they had more of a reason to kill Michael Spilatro as well, rather than just lure him to the meeting. But we all know they were originally going to kill Spilatros in Vegas. They couldn't really get a hold of him. They canceled that. They went to Plan B. Iupa goes to prison, gives the green light to Carlisi and Ferriola, and we all know what happened. The brothers were lured to a house in Bensonville. They could have easily been shot, but no, they were beaten and stomped together with their feet and their fists. The autopsy photo they showed on Tony Spilatro was so bad you couldn't recognize him. From the chest to his head was all black, purple, and blue. But this is Joe Ferriola. He was released after doing 10 years in Leavenworth. First thing he did when he got to his mansion in Oak Brook was he raised the Italian-American flag. Now, here's a federal hospital, Rochester, Minnesota. Mario Ranone, heavyweight in Chicago outfit, one of the last Mohicans. This man is still alive today. He's trying to get off supervised vision so he can travel. I seen him during the Gus Alex trial. He was one of the men that was going into car dealerships, restaurant, and threatening violence. At one point, he thought about cooperating. Then they blew up part of his house or his relative's home. He got the message. He kept his mouth shut. Did his time like a man. Never ratted, never rolled. Fast forward, I seen him again. He got pinched on a gun charge. Nobody was in the courtroom. It was just Joe Lopez, myself, and maybe a couple attorneys. The gun was in the nightstand between the bed. Mario denied owning the gun, but he got 15 years for that. Did 15 years in prison on his head, never ratted, never rolled. This guy is one of the last Mohicans of Chicago outfit. He's free today. He's alive, and hopefully he's behaving himself. He spent time at Butner, North Carolina as well. And then you got Gus Alex. Gus Alex was the first trial I ever went to. He was convicted. The jury believed Lenny Patrick that he was receiving kickbacks from Lenny Patrick's violent extortion crew. Gus Alex wanted to go to Oxford, but he ended up in Butner as well. Oxford Prison, another federal prison close to home. This is where Alderman Fred Rohde was sentenced, one of the most powerful men in Illinois from the First Ward, made member Chicago outfit, and the 26th Street crew. If you wanted a job, if you wanted to bribe a judge, if you wanted to beat a murder, if you wanted a liquor license, anything you needed done in the city of Chicago, you went to see Alderman Fred Rohde. He has a saying, vote for me and nobody gets hurt, but he spent time in Oxford as well as Governor George Ryan. I went to the George Ryan trial. George Ryan was convicted. He had a scam going on at Navy Pier in the corner place called McPier, and George Ryan did 6 years for basically handing out CDL licenses like candy. But when Jimmy Marcello's son passed away, when Sally D's son passed away, when Bobby Salerno's son passed away, when George Ryan's wife passed away, all while these men were locked up, the government wouldn't even allow them to pay their respects and attend their funeral services. Every one of those men I just mentioned would be more than willing to pay, to be escorted to the funeral. But that just shows you they don't even allow them to pay their respects to their family members. I think that's a sin. We're almost done. We'll talk about large, right? Mike Sarno. This guy got 25 years. I went to his trial. It was an interesting trial because it showed the outfit's connection between Chicago outfit and the outlaw motorcycle gang. I thought the charges against Mike were kind of weak. Most of the charges were mostly against the other defendants, but Sarno got convicted, and this man is no longer a threat. His outfit days are over. He's up there in age. He's got some serious health issues. And Mike Sarno right now is at the United States Medical Center for Federal Prisoners. Some of these guys do end up in the hospital wing of the federal prisons. which isn't so bad as a medium or a maximum prison, but it's nothing like being home. Mike Sarno is no longer a threat to anybody, regardless of what Scott Bernstein and some of these YouTubers say. This guy is no longer running the Chicago outfit. There is no more Chicago outfit. Most of these guys are dead or in jail, and the few that are left have all went legit. Now, another guy that spent time is at the United States Federal Prison is the Chin. This is one of the smartest mob bosses in the history of Cosa Nostra. He eventually got pinched. There's him walking around with his brother who was a priest. I think the Chin did some time at Miriam as well with John Gotti, his op. Now here we're going to talk about Rocky LaMattia. I actually became friends with him during the family secret trial. He sat next to me every day. Rocky got kicked out of court because he tried smuggling Frank Calabrese prosciutto in Capicola. They consider that contraband. But I bring up Rocky LaMattia because after the family secrets trial, Rocky really screwed up. Him and his friends robbed a pawn shop right there in Jewtown. And after the robbery, Rocky went back to the scene of the crime, he claims, to check on the owners who were his friends. When the owners were giving the police, making a police report, they said, hey, there he is. And they arrested Rocky there right on the site. Rocky was the alleged driver in the burglary crew. This guy could have easily ratted and stitched out. He knows everybody in the Chicago outfit. Him and his father were very close associates with the 26th Street crew. And he spent time, I think it's a maximum security state prison called Menard. This is a real nasty place. When I saw the booking photo of Rocky, I didn't even recognize him. He lost a lot of weight. He looked terrible. But Rocky did his time like a man, never ratted, never rolled. And when he got out, I seen him at the Italian Fest. He had a nice tan. He gained weight. And he was showing me pictures on his phone of him drinking champagne out of the Stanley Cup. And I said, Rocky, man, you're really something else. Here's a guy fresh out of jail, and now you're drinking out of the Stanley Cup. The reason he was good friends with some of the players and the goaltending coach. But Rocky, if he didn't get involved in organized crime activity, he could have been a professional hockey player or a professional coach. But God bless Rocky LaMattia and his father, Shorty LaMattia. I'm almost done, guys. Yeah, I do. I did a show on Pudgy Matassa. I can either send that to you or you look up in my old archives. But Pudgy, he is alive and well. Hopefully he's behaving himself. He took a pinch with his wife not too long ago. I think paid a fine, did a couple of years. But yeah, I'll do a story on Pudgy. He was very close with Jimmy Marcello, I believe. Yeah, I think Wings, I think he died and they had to have a heart attack and they had to escort him with some kind of a golf cart or something. But yeah, Sam Carlisi. Let me make sure I didn't forget anybody. Single and looking, thanks for tuning in. I'm almost done. Interesting, I know the gun used in the Sam Giancana murder was made by Ronnie Jared and Frank Calabrese Sr. at Ronnie Jared's mother-in-law's garage. So that was stated at the family secret trial. The gun used. Junior believes that. It's possible. I don't know, though. I don't know if Tony Ricardo did it. Either him, Tony Spilaccio, or Butchie. But again, another unsolved murder of the Chicago outfit. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Yeah, he told his brother Gene. I love the prison meetings with Gotti and his daughter Victoria and his grandson Frankie and his brother Pete. But yeah, Gotti said you can hit him in the head with a pipe if he could have just some mozzarella sauce in a microwave. That's funny. That's how bad the prison food is. I remember one time during the family secrets trial, I think it was Joe Lombardo requested if they could order La Scarola, and to the judge and prosecutor's surprise, the judge and prosecutor allowed it, but the deal was everybody in the courtroom would eat La Scarola, the defense and the prosecutor. So sure enough, Joe Lombardo, Ralph Halpern, his lawyer, they ordered La Scarola for the defense and the prosecution to all enjoy a nice Italian meal during the family secret trial. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. He took a beating, that kid, a verbal lashing. He's like, maybe I'll become a cook. But I like John Gotti, man. Even though he had a big mouth and he broke every rule, they don't make men like that anymore. But let's get back to this. Now, we're talking about a really nasty place called Stateville. I think they finally shut this hellhole down, and they may even have turned it into a haunted house. But you got Sam Giancana spent time at Statesville. Gacy, Richard Speck, not only spent time there, but were killed there prior to George Ryan abolishing the death penalty. Also at Statesville, you had Larry Hoover, one of the biggest shot callers in the country, leader of one of the largest gangs, the Black Gangster Disciples. Also at Stateville, I don't know if you guys remember the Palatine Massacre. Palatine is a suburb in Chicago, and many years ago, Juan Luna, a Spanish guy, and this Polish guy, forget his name, Morawski, I think, they robbed Brown's Chicken, and for some reason, they gathered all 7, 8, 9 employees, put them in the freezer, and killed all of them. So they call it the Brown's Chicken Massacre. And this crime went unsolved for years. And Juan Luna, one of the killers, ate a chicken wing and left his DNA on the chicken leg. So that tied him to the crime. Fast forward, the Polish guy, Morawski, after the murder, they were all hyped up. When they went back to the apartment, they were drinking, getting high. They confessed to Morawski's girlfriend what they just did. And they told her, if you tell anybody, we'll kill you. So this girl, if you believe her, was scared to death. She lived with the secret for years. Fast forward a couple of years later, she went to the cops and she told them that Juan Luna and her boyfriend Morawski confessed. So they caught him, they convicted him, they both went to jail. Both of those scumbags who killed those 8, 9 innocent people at the Brown's Chicken are in Statesville, or were in Statesville. Now, why he was locked up at the Cook County Jail, the Cook County sheriffs beat the shit out of Morawski, put him in a coma. His family sued for millions. I'm going to do a story on the Brown's Chicken Massacre, but that's a true story. One of the killers, big white Polish guy, Morawski, got beat pretty bad by the Cook County sheriffs, because in the Cook County Jail, either the inmates are going to get you or the guards are going to get you. It's one or the other. But he was beaten by the guards. His family sued, and they won millions. So he'll never get out of prison, but he's got millions in the bank based on the lawsuit. That's a true story. And we'll wrap it up here. Larry Hoover, right? He got convicted for killing a gangster in the early 70s. And rather than send him to a maximum security prison, they sent him to Vienna, which is a minimum security prison. Hoover had access to the entire prison: women, food, drugs, alcohol, TV, whatever he wanted. The only thing he couldn't leave. So Hoover was running the gang from his prison cell. I went to his trial as well. It was him, a beautiful Chicago cop, and about 5 high-ranking GDs. When they would visit Hoover in prison, the government put an ultra-thin transmitter in the visitor's pass, and it picked up thousands of hours of coded conversation between Hoover and his homies. Hoover was ordering hits. The government said they made $100 million a year selling drugs. They had over 30,000 soldiers. They would talk in code. Instead of saying cocaine, they would say chicken. The female cop who was dating Hoover's right-hand man claimed she had no idea what the crew was doing. but she owned several chicken and fish restaurants on the south side, and she was letting the little homies, the gangbangers, use her payphones to sell drugs. When they talked about certain cliques, they would talk in football numbers, like Dallas Cowboys beat the Green Bay Packers by 7, or Chicago Bears lost to New York Giants by 3. So when you listen to the tapes, they're talking in code, you think they're talking about gambling. The government hired a black female FBI agent to break down the code. Once she broke down the code for the jury, it was quite obviously what Larry Hoover was doing. Hoover now is in the ADX Supermax. This guy has done decades in prison. I don't think he's really a threat anymore. A lot of people are trying to get him released, but I don't think they're going to release him. What do you guys think? Let's read some comments. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for tuning in and sticking with me. Read a couple more comments here. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, man, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. I got a rat of the month coming up, a surprise rat we're going to talk about. I'm going to do a show on the Chop Shop Wars. I'm also going to go a little bit deeper into Lenny Patrick's testimony as well as Nick Calabrese's testimony. If you guys want the transcripts, let me know. If you want to go on a tour, if you're ever in Chicago, let me know. If you want to buy a shirt, I got you. That's it, guys. It's been over an hour. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Have a great week. Stay safe. And for you haters out there, put out the cigarettes. Get off your porn site. Go cut the grass. Maybe even do the dishes. Take the old lady to Olive Garden, will you? Ciao.